It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and many other shiny objects that happen to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Wall Street Journal cartoonist and Hall of Fame nominated marker Stu Heinecke, and we're going to be discussing his book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, The Untapped Selling Power of Contact Marketing. Stu, thanks for joining us on today's show.
Hey, what a pleasure to join you. Glad to be here.
Well, between cartoons, marketing, writing, you bring together a unique set of skills and abilities. I would love to have you talk to us about, say, maybe the order at which those things emerged in your younger or your early years, and what was the convergence point where they started to come together in a meaningful way? Because you're bringing some unique stuff together and you've accomplished a lot. How did that even happen?
It is a crazy combination, but it's kind of fun to talk about. The thing that came first was cartooning. Gosh, I don't know if I should explain how that came about, though, because my brothers and I used to sneak Playboys out of my father's dresser drawers, and I would look at the cartoons and say, who are these guys? How do they do this? And so that probably was where the first thing was that cartooning became a passion, just something I really enjoyed. And you know, there are probably cartoons on old desks somewhere at my old schools, and they're gone. I don't know, but yeah, that was probably the first one. And in fact, in college, just before graduating, one of my friends had said that I went to USC, and so crosstown rivals were UCLA, but UCLA had this excellent extension school, and there was one course on cartooning, and I thought, oh my gosh, you're so lucky that you got to do this. Tell me all about it. And he would tell me about every class, and about Lee Lorenz, the cartoon editor at the time of the New Yorker, coming in and giving a talk. And I thought, man, you are so fortunate to have been. I wish I could go to that class. It just sounds great. And the more he spoke about it, the more I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to get out there. I'm just going to try doing it professionally. And that's a really slow boil, or route to a boil. At the same time, at USC, I was studying marketing. And so those two converged. And they converged because of an article that I saw. I became a member of the Cartoonist Guild. By that time, I started publishing cartoons. I wasn't publishing them, but my cartoons were published in the LA Herald. And so this article from Folio magazine said, hey, this is a magazine for editors of other magazines. So it was saying, hey, we want to alert you to the fact that readership surveys are always pointing to this one item in the magazines that is getting all of the readership and memory retention, and that is cartoons. And I thought, wow, they must be incredibly powerful in marketing. So that was sort of the genesis of mixing the two, and there was a lot of the story goes on from there a long time, for a long time. But that's how they mixed together. And writing a book, man, that was much later. So that was the order in which they came.
Well, and I'd be curious for somebody who hadn't written a book per se before, or a trade book. What's the story behind that? Was there somebody that just said, the stuff you've done is so brilliant, you need to tell other people? How did you get to the point where you had a contracted writing project?
Man, well, before I did that, I self-published 2 books. And so one of them was called Drawing Attention. And that one, I just felt I have to write this because by then, there was a great headwind when I started out using cartoons and any form of humor in direct marketing. That was where it led. Because all of the pundits were saying, don't use humor, it doesn't work. They'd have that list of things up on stage saying, these are the 10 things you've got to avoid in order to have a successful campaign. And humor was always on their list. And I would sit in the audience thinking, these guys don't understand this. They don't understand how powerful cartoons are. So, eventually then I ended up with all the big magazine publishers as clients. I mean, I created a lot of record-breaking campaigns using that magic of cartoons to pull people in, draw people in maybe, and get them involved just to get them to pull that piece of mail out of the stack of mail that they got that day and go, wow, hey, that's pretty cool. So I wanted to write a book about that. I just felt like, well, now this test history is so utterly unique. I need to write a book about it and share it. And that was drawing attention. But then writing the book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, really came about because the whole time, throughout the time that I'd been creating campaigns for clients, direct marketing campaigns, well, I had been using contact marketing. I didn't unwittingly. I'd been using my cartoons. Just I knew it was a great device to break through, and so I'd been using those the whole time to open doors. And the more I looked around, the more I realized, well, my gosh, I'm not the only one using interesting things, interesting methods, sort of audacious and creative methods for breaking through. There are a lot of really interesting things that are being done out there. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized this is a book. This has to be shared. And so that's where How to Get a Meeting with Anyone started.
Well, and just the whole self-publishing part of your journey, you were self-publishing before it was even cool.
Yeah, is it cool now? I don't know.
Well, it seems to be more of a norm in the industry, at least. Yeah. When you were starting out doing it, it wasn't as accessible. I feel like today we have the tools and resources where it can be fairly turnkey if you want to self-publish, but earlier on, it was a process to find the team, everything you needed to bring together to make that happen.
That's true. But I've got to say, though, that publishing commercially, there's nothing that compares to it. And certainly self-publishing doesn't. I love doing it with actual publishers, actually.
Yeah, the nice thing is you don't have to wear all the hats. That's the dirty little secret of self-publishing is you get to be the writer and the editor and the marketer and the designer or hire all those different people to pull a nice book together. It's two very different paths to get a book. Well, let's talk about kind of that pivotal experience. You share some of this in the book, and I know you shared this a lot, but tell us how you discovered contact marketing. What was kind of that pivotal campaign experience where you're like, this kind of came together, the one that gave you the 1,000,000,000% return on investment?
Yeah, well, it was the first one I did, actually. That did happen. So, well, I mentioned that I wanted to use cartooning in direct marketing in the big arena of direct marketing, which was magazine publishing. They were the biggest, most sophisticated users of it and testers, and it was, and they had the biggest budget, so the biggest creative fees, everything. It was great, but it took something. That's a tough one to break into. So my journey was this: I was able to break through to Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit magazines. Both of them said, "Sure, we'll have you create some test campaigns. Let's see what happens." And both of those test campaigns beat the controls. And what that means, though, is in statistics, you're always testing against a control group, a constant. In direct marketing, you're testing against the control, which is the most effective thing they've ever mailed. So if you tie the control, then you've just tied the record for the most effective thing they've ever put in the mail. If you beat the control, you just broke the record. And my first two assignments we beat the controls. So I thought, okay, that's amazing. That's my opportunity to bring this to the rest of the publishing industry now. So what I realized I needed to do, the mission was that I needed to get in touch with about 24 VPs and directors of circulation who were responsible for consumer marketing for the magazines. And these were VPs and directors at Time Inc. and Condé Nast and the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and Harvard Business Review. And so these were not going to be easy people to reach. And I thought, okay, well, so I'm going to have to put together a little campaign. I didn't know what to call it, so I called it a contact campaign. And my campaign consisted of a little 8x10 print of a cartoon that I personally, all of my cartoons, or most of them, all of the cartoons I use in marketing are written so that I can include a person's first and last name in the cartoon. So that's what I did. I personalized each cartoon, and it went out with a note that said, this is the device I just used to beat the controls for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit, and I think we should put this to the test for your titles. And as I was putting this together, I was thinking, well, in direct response, they always used to say, if you get a 1% response rate, you're doing really well. That's a really good response rate. And I couldn't afford to have a response rate that low. That would be terrible. I mean, 1% of 24 people would be not one person even, So even a 10% response rate isn't possible, actually. That's 2.4 people. No, but still, a 10% response rate would have been a disaster. I wanted to reach all of them. So really, I was aspiring to a 100% response rate, which, again, all the pundits, they were always wrong about these things. So they used to say humor wouldn't work, and they also used to say as well that 100% response rates were impossible. But that's what I felt I needed. And that's what I got. I mean, all of them responded. All of them, I connected with all of them. All of them became clients. So it's not only a 100% contact rate, but a 100% conversion rate. And this little campaign to 24 people, it was worth millions of dollars to me. It launched my business. And it all came from a campaign that I spent about $100 on and sent to 24 people. And that's really a great example of what contact marketing is really all about. You're focusing on very few people. You're doing something audacious, really kind of crazy. I mean, that one wasn't all that crazy, I guess, but nobody had seen cartoons about themselves. So in a way, it was. It had a lot of impact. And some of these campaigns, people have spent. Well, actually, there's a range from $0, nothing, to $10,000 per contact. And it's, if the monetization on the back end of it is worthwhile, if these are really that important, these contacts are that important to you or that critical to your success, it makes sense. So that's the whole genesis, in my mind, for me, actually, literally in my mind, of contact marketing. Obviously, people have been doing it. They've been using all kinds of really interesting methods for a long time. I didn't invent that, but that was my introduction to it.
Well, that's fabulous ROI. Thank you for sharing that story. And while you didn't invent that, I think you gave us verbiage or words to put around some of it so we could maybe talk about what we're all trying to do in a little bit better. And you also give us a framework for it, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. Another thing I want you to comment on first. So I'm a guy, I work in the publishing industry, and it's rare that I'd be willing to say a book is geared towards every reader. Although when you're working with new authors, they'll always say, well, who's this book for? Well, it's for everybody, everywhere. However, we find ourselves at a point just in culture and history where we're all influencers between the mom at home who uses social media, the person marketing a product or what have you. It's a time where social proof is important and at an all-time high. The economy of scale and business is really people's attention, and so influence is really, really critical. So I feel like your book is at this point is for everybody in a bigger way than maybe it was when the book released, because we've changed, we've continued to shift a lot. But back in the beginning, when you were working on this book, working on the manuscript, who were those, say, one or two ideal readers that were in your mind's eye when you were putting together the book? Because I always feel like an author is probably writing for somebody. And it's generally not everybody. So I'm curious who those people were for you in the creative process.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, and I don't mean to go laugh over you, but I'm laughing because, yes, publishers hate it when you say, well, it's for everyone. Narrow it down. Come on. We're talking about a marketing plan here. Come on. But, I think that salespeople, I knew salespeople were, actually salespeople and business owners were the ones who were going to say, well, there are people I just have to meet. I have to meet people in order to sell, or startups. They have to meet everybody. They've got to meet investors and strategic. Actually, we all need to meet strategic partners and so on. So, but as you say, though, we all need to connect with people that are going to be important to our success. So in a really kind of an awkward way, it is for everybody. Awkward because I'm talking to a publisher right now, But the thing is, I actually another area that I really left out of the book, but we keep seeing stories. I keep seeing stories pop up about it. Is just using the same thing in job search. You've in any of these instances, you've got to stand out in a way that gets people saying, "Wow, what's that? Oh, this is cool." But also, man, I love the way this person thinks. So. Wouldn't that be useful in job search? Obviously it is. Wouldn't it be useful in reaching out to someone that you'd like to have as a mentor? Of course it is. Or someone who's got a sales channel that you couldn't possibly reproduce, and you bring a benefit to them. Well, of course, it's important to reach them. And if you can't break through, then nothing happens. So in a very embarrassing way, because we're both now pros at this. It is for everyone in a way, but especially I think it's especially useful for salespeople, sales managers, and then business owners, because we're all really concerned with growth.
Well, and I really appreciate that you brought up that this is a book that could be useful for somebody doing a job search, or just this idea of putting this level of effort there. Because I've worn a bunch of different hats. I've interviewed and hired, 40, 50 people throughout my career, and interviewed hundreds of people. But one of the things I always coach people on who are doing a lot of interviews is, well, basically you're going to have to help them understand how you are the answer to their dreams, their hopes. It was inevitable that your story was going to converge with their story, and it was just you're the guy or you're the gal who is the perfect fit for that. So, in the same way of whether we're trying to sell or market a product, you're trying to sell or market yourself. So the same principles are going to apply and be helpful in that kind of a scenario as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be able to, just in life, you've got to be able to connect with people. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens without connecting with other people. And you've got strengths that others don't have, and others have strengths or opportunities that you need. And it's just inevitable. That's how we're programmed. And so but the thing is, if you can't break through to the people that really will make a difference to you, then you're not going to make a difference.
Yeah, your ability to scale is going to be limited by the people that you are interacting with. So if you want to break out of that network or those spheres, it's going to take some hard work and some research and some creativity. So let's let that transition us into the next part of the conversation here. So before we're going to be connecting, say, with CEOs or high-level influencers, we're going to need some education. So what are a few of the things that we absolutely need to understand about trying to reach and connect with VIPs? As somebody who's been podcasting for like 6-7 years now, early on when I didn't have a lot of traction and people didn't know who I was, although podcasting was still kind of a weird format back then, people didn't always know what it was. But if you reach too far outside of your circle, you will get shut down because they go, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why would I want to talk to you? And so, whether it's podcasting or cold emailing people, we often learn the hard way that, this may not be the most effective way to go about it. So what are some things that we really should keep in mind when we're thinking of reaching high-level people outside of our circles?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think one of the main things is that these people are really busy. They're busy, and a lot of people are trying to reach them. And so they have to be, they're just bombarded. And after a while, it's natural that they would shut that off, or it would become more and more difficult to get their attention. So understand that they're busy, their time is very limited, and when you reach out to them, respect their time. I think I would say two things for those C-level people. One is respect their time, and the other is make sure you understand the value that you want to bring to them, and that that it's going to make a difference to them, and be able to express it quickly and be on time. Just those permutations of respecting their time make all the difference in the world as well. Now, the other one, though, is that a lot of times these people are surrounded by people we like to call gatekeepers. I don't like to call them that because executive assistants, we'll call them that for now. But if you think about it, yes, executive assistants are charged with the responsibility of keeping out the calls that the executive just doesn't have time for and shouldn't be wasting their focus on. But they're also charged with the responsibility of finding those things, those opportunities, the nuggets that the executive would otherwise miss. These things are coming directly to them, and if the executive assistant isn't aware, isn't watching for these things, then they're also not doing their job. And in the book, I call them VPs of access or talent scouts, and that's really what they are. So when you're in your outreach, first of all, respect them. I mean, I'm a big fan of them, actually, and I think they could probably tell that when I call, because I love what they're doing. What they're doing is, and who they are. I mean, I think they're some of the sharpest people in the organization, and they're the ones that are going to help you break through. So I have a great deal of respect for them. I usually include them in my campaigns. So it could be something as simple as sending them a card thanking them for their help, but also It's about considering them when I'm, let's say, developing a script. And so I've got to develop scripts from time to time because I pass along what I'm doing to my clients and their teams. And so when I'm sending one of my, I call it a big board, one of my cartoon pieces now, I've gone through all kinds of evolutions of how I send those cards, send those cartoons. And as I mentioned, I started with just an 8x10 print and a note, and that gradually became what I call a big board. So it's an 18 by 24 inch, quarter-inch thick foam core board that has a cartoon, that cartoon on one side about the recipient, and on the other side is all the branding and the messaging about introducing myself, or whoever the sender is, introducing themselves, explaining why they want to reach out and what they want. Do they want a meeting? Do they want a phone call? What are they going to do next? Is their staff going to call? Please watch for my call, whatever it is. And perhaps also introducing a holdback device, something that is offered to be brought to the meeting when the meeting happens. It's really as an incentive for making that meeting happen. So, I lost my train of thought here a little bit, but what I'm thinking though here is that when I talk to the executive assistant, I have a really quick statement to give, and in the book I call it my VIP statement. And here it is. My VIP statement is, I'm saying, hi, my name is Stu Heinecke. I'm one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and I have a print of one of my cartoons, and it's about your boss, and I'd like to send it to your boss. But the thing is, I don't want it to be a surprise to you. I want it to be a surprise to your boss. So we end up coordinating together. And usually by the time I've gotten to the point where I'm saying I'm one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists and I have a print of one of my cartoons and it's about your boss, they're going, what? Really? So it has qualified, very quickly as being something that they know they're going to want to bring to their bosses. And they're going to be excited to bring it to their bosses, actually. And so that in combination with, I want to involve you in this process. You're part of this process. And I want to coordinate this with you and through you, is a lot better than trying to trick your way past them, or blast them with, I don't know what, a lot of times CEOs or C-level executives, whoever happens to have these assistants, will ask, well, how were they on the phone with you? They want to know that. Were they polite or were they jerks? If they were jerks, then blow them off. So they're really, really central to the success of your campaign. So those two things, respect the executive's time and your purpose, the value you need to bring to them, and also respect the role and value of executive assistants.
Yeah, I learned a long time ago, at the different companies I've worked at, assistants and people that answer the phone, people that are at the front desk in front of the executive offices. They're very important and critical people for getting anything done inside an organization, and they're even that much more critical when it's an organization that you're not directly a part of. Another thing I would say too is, sometimes the timing is just off depending on what you're requesting. So somebody might shut you down, somebody might say no. It's not personal. They're not necessarily being mean or rude. It's just maybe not a good fit for them at this time. I like what you said. We don't want to be annoying and just keep bombarding people. But I've connected with and talked with high-level people where they're always going to tell you no the first time. They might tell you no 2 or 3 times, but if you keep coming back, you're kind, you're respectful, and you keep showing interest a 4th or 5th time, then they might actually be like, wow, this guy's really serious. He wants to connect with me. So sometimes just saying no a few times can be kind of a gatekeeping tactic to kind of weed people out who really are just in it for a quick buck, or they just want to leverage it for some odd reason. Sometimes when you're coming back a 4th or a 5th time, you're showing some real interest, and that's kind of intriguing and interesting. So you really just got to keep in mind, there's often a lot more going on behind the scenes than we even realize, even though all we're simply doing is trying to reach out and connect.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important aspect here of persistence. You have to do the same thing when you're reaching out to guests for your show. And by the way, a show is a great contact device. I'm sure you've noticed.
Oh yeah,
It connects you with a lot of people. And this is fun doing these interviews. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of a bonding experience. So even that is a contact campaign, actually. But as you say, reaching out to people who they're otherwise drinking from a fire hose, and they've got to have some way of deciphering who they let in and who they don't. They don't want to make mistakes. There's some things that they might regret missing. but if they don't know about it, they never know about it. If they never know about your interests, then they will miss it. Um, so yeah, that's interesting. The one thing I try to do with my campaigns though is I want to try to blast past all of that. I know it's important to be persistent, but isn't it even better if the first time you reach out, they go, "Oh my God, man, thanks for reaching out. That was great. What do we want to talk about?" You know, I think that's kind of an important part of contact marketing as well is getting into these. Many sales reps out there are they're working under the regime of account-based marketing, and so they're assigned accounts, but you can't sell anything if you can't break through. So there's still just, how do we speed that up? How do we make it happen more? And how do we speed it up is really the two main questions that we hope to answer with contact marketing.
Well, next let's talk about one of the pieces that I think people find really challenging in this process, and that's getting a VIP makeover, I believe is what you call it in the book. But we're all starting out in a place, and we want to connect with people who are in a different place, and somehow we're going to have to transform ourselves and reposition ourselves so the people we're trying to connect with can go, "Oh, well, this is an obvious fit. Of course we would want to connect with you." So give us a window into some of the things that are involved in giving yourself a VIP makeover.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great point. I think actually, and as I will also say that in the time since I wrote the book, LinkedIn has become such a huge force in every business person's life, and it's a great place it's a great place to stand out, and also a very difficult place to stand out because there's so many people, there's so much activity. But I think that's a great place to be posting content. I mean, you could be posting content from others, but if you're going to do that, then it ought to be from interesting and generally unavailable sources. So one thing that you could do as a makeover is start attending conferences, taking notes, and start offering those notes up to the executives you want to connect with. Sort of be their reporter on scene, and these would be reports that they won't find otherwise, or content that they won't find otherwise. Obviously, you want to look like an executive. I think that's an important point. Although that's changing a lot. I mean, it's a little more casual. But if you'd like to be contrarian, then start dressing up more. Paying attention to that, or addiction, or joining the board or local board of a charitable organization. I think is a great way to start standing out as someone who is not just trying to sell you something, but someone who's giving back to the world. Those kinds of posts tend to lead to lots of other networking opportunities anyway. But I think you just need to become someone that we see it. We see people doing it all the time through thought leadership and just showing up, particularly on LinkedIn, or writing articles. Those kinds of things, getting your name out is important, because if they start recognizing your name because of your work, that is going to help you break through. And then finally, I would say you need to develop that VIP statement. What is it you say to the executive assistant or to the person you're reaching out to that tells them you're someone that they want to connect with? And so mine is, hi, my name is Stu Heinecke. I'm one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, a Hall of Fame nominated marketer, and the author of the book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. Now, I usually say 12 words or less, and that was probably about 3 times that, but try to get it down to 12 words or less, because the point of that is to make it very brief so that people have a chance to digest it and take in the value of it. And so even when I gave you that much information, that might have been too much. But as you said at the opening of the show, saying that I'm one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists is a bizarre enough thing as it is. And then I'm a marketer, and I've combined the two. Well, how the heck does that happen? And then I'm the author of the book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. I think probably helps people say, yeah, this is worth spending a few. What does this guy want? What's he going to tell me? And that's what you want. You want this really brief statement that has people not only saying this person has value, but how on earth do you do that? you sort of leave some intrigue in there as well.
Yeah, you definitely want them to be intrigued and have a bit of wonder. In addition to LinkedIn, I would say Quora is a place where people are getting there's a lot of untapped traction to be found there, because the whole site is geared around people asking questions about anything imaginable, and you can post questions, you can answer questions. So if you're looking to position your expertise, Quora is a really interesting place to be interacting right now. I like your conference idea. I would also say, if you're just not in a place where you have the opportunity to go to a lot of conferences, I would say do that with the top business books, the new business and marketing books that are coming out. Read it and write a really solid book review that tells people, well, these are the 5 takeaways or the things you need to know, and then start posting things like that on Quora and LinkedIn and elsewhere. That'd be an even faster way to come up with content. And the other thing I would say around that is just be willing to serve. People, I feel like, can read through it pretty quickly. If you're just there to take and not to give, that really pushes people off. But if you have a posture where you're serving and you really care about people, and that's obvious, I think just that by itself, you do enough of that will open doors for you eventually as well. So those would be a few things I would add to that part of our conversation. Next, let's talk about why we need to identify a specific list of, say, top prospects. I think, one, having a VIP statement and very much knowing what we're about, that's critical. So we know what we're going to say, and so we actually have defined what exactly it is that we want to be doing. But why is it important that we identify a list of prospects? Because we can't just blast this out to everybody. We need to be specific with who we're trying to connect with and why.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, first of all, if your career is sales, it's likely that you are now working under that framework of account-based marketing. So your accounts have been identified, and now you just need to identify who within those accounts you need to connect with. So that's not terribly hard to do, and it's obviously necessary to do if you're going to sell to those accounts. You need to know who you're going to be reaching out to. That's pretty well defined, pretty easily defined. But if you're more independent, then you do need to figure out who are the people that could change the scale of your business or of your career or of your life. Really, who are the people that you really would love to connect with them, but you can also see that if they became a client or a mentor or a partner in some way, that you would benefit, or maybe you'd both benefit. Hopefully that's what happens, but you would both benefit to a large degree. In the book, I call it the top 100, but in my example earlier, my first example of using contact marketing in my own experience, that was sending the cartoon print and the letter to the 24 VPs and directors of circulation around the magazine industry. That was just 24 people, but they were hugely. Well, I mean, first of all, that was the focus. I needed to break through, and I needed to get those magazines as clients, and so it was really easy to define who those people were, who they needed to be, and of course, magazines make it really easy. You can go to the newsstand, pick it up, and read through the masthead, find them. It's pretty easy to do. But the internet's made it very, very easy to figure out who it is that you need to reach within essentially any organization. But it's like, there's that book, Ready, Fire, Aim, which is a great title as well. You need to have a target. You've got a big gun to use. You need to know where to aim it. And so that's why it's so critical to know exactly who it is you're going to be reaching out to. Gosh, it's such a strategic thing to say, who are the people that are going to open up my world? You ought to know that. And you ought to constantly be culling that list and updating it and finding new people. Other people may not be as important and may not turn out to be as important to you, or maybe they're not reachable. Maybe they don't want to talk after all. I don't know, but that list ought to be a constant thing. You ought to be absolutely aware of who it is you need to connect with next to make the biggest impacts in your life and in your career.
Well, and sometimes I think it just takes either a little extra creativity or knowing how an industry or a place that a particular person is connected with, how that works. For instance, if somebody's an author, you can try reaching that author directly. You could try figuring out who their assistant is, depending on what they do. If they're a part of a company or a business, there might be a channel there. However, if they work, or if they're an author and they have a book, you could try going through the publisher. Like I connected with you through the publicist contact at your publisher, and so sometimes there are multiple gatekeepers, and you have to be creative with how you figure out who those people are. But it's not there. There isn't always just a single gatekeeper. Sometimes there's multiple doors you could walk through, depending on what you're trying to position. For the instance with a publicist, if it's related to an interview or an article or an excerpt, something like that, well, that's an interesting way that you could connect. And so, yeah, just maybe think out of the box and look for other ways to connect. That would be one thing I often am recommending to folks. So we've got a list of prospects. We've been doing research, which, like you said, the internet makes it way easier to do research, say, than maybe it was a decade ago. Now we're ready to craft a highly personalized message and deliver it in some fun, intriguing, standout kind of way. Would love to have you either share, some of your stories, or, for clients you've worked with, or, readers that have gotten back to you, what are some of the strangest, most funky, standout ways people have tried to put this part of your message into use? Because I'm sure people have gone pretty far out of the box to get somebody's attention.
Man, have they ever. And, and I'm glad you're asking this question, because I keep talking about cartoons, and they're a great device, and they stick around. People keep them in their offices the rest of their careers. They're wonderful benefits to sending cartoons, but not everybody's a cartoonist. So, and that's not at all the entirety of contact marketing. So, yeah, I mean, someone, I'm working on the next book, and so someone wanted to be in it, and they're getting in it. They sent me just a block of wood, not wrapped. They just addressed it, put a stamp on it, and sent it to me. It doesn't have to be very expensive, does it? But on the other end of the scale, here's a guy that Rick Bennett has a really interesting story. Rick owned an advertising agency in the San Francisco Bay Area a long time ago. And he had a client. It was a tech startup that who had or I should say, the owner of a tech startup, who approached him one day and said, "You know what? I'd really like to present my company to Larry Ellison, the CEO and founder of Oracle, because I think he'd really want to buy it. But I have no idea how to get in front of him." And that's a really tough one. He's really tough to crack. Well, Rick said, he's one of these guys who says, no, I've got an idea. So he had an idea right away. What his idea is he said, we're going to put together a contact letter, and I'm going to produce it as a full page ad, and we will run it in the Wall Street Journal. And that's pretty audacious. That's a client to one person. And it, by the way, cost $10,000. That's the one that cost $10,000. So they did this. And here's what's really interesting. We know that Larry's probably a reader of the Wall Street Journal, but that's not what made this stand out. What did was that all of the people that knew Larry at the time and had ready access to him, they saw it. And it recruited their help. Everybody that Larry, it seems like everybody that Larry knew that could get through. It recruited all their help because they were calling him all day long saying, "Hey, Larry, did you see this thing in the Wall Street Journal?" And so if he hadn't, he would have. He made sure of that. And that meeting did take place. And Larry was interested. He bought the company. Oracle bought the company for $350 million. So if you do the math on that, and that's one of the wonderful things about contact marketing is the metrics are just crazy. Here we either have a possibility of 0% response or 100%. It was 100%. Maybe not a statistically valid number, but the ROI was 3.5 million% on that campaign. And what we generally see in these campaigns is that the response rates. Well, the response rate, I don't want to say that they're 100% all the time, because there's no way that they're 100%. But the fact that there's a form of marketing that can even achieve that is amazing. So even if it's 10%, that might be versus a 1% or 0.5% response to other methods. It really does improve the odds of breaking through. So that's a great example. There's another one that I really like, which is Dan Waldschmidt's story. Now, Dan he's one of the top bloggers in the sales space. He writes a blog called Edgy Conversations. He's also an ultra-competitor, an ultra-competitive athlete. He runs 100-mile races and wins. That's pretty crazy. And so, but what he does, though, as a profession is he's a turnaround specialist. But you can see that these elements of knife's edge and ultra competitiveness are part of his personal brand as well. So anyway, he's got this really interesting way of reaching out to CEOs of stories, of companies that are in trouble. And what he does is he watches the business news every morning for stories of missed earnings estimates. And when he finds one, he has a beautiful sword made up. I mean, these swords are. I now have a sample of it for the next book. They're real. I mean, they're not real. They're props made by the prop maker who made all the swords for the movie Gladiator. So these are beautiful. I mean, they're not plastic at all. They're metal and leather and wood, and they're handmade. They're just beautiful pieces. And so anyway, he puts that into the beautiful wooden box, and into the box goes a little handwritten note. The note says. Actually, it doesn't say but what it says is, business is war, and I noticed you lost a battle recently, and I just want to let you know that if you ever need a few extra hands in battle, we've got your back. And really interesting aspects about this campaign. One is that there's no branding in it because he doesn't write it on letterhead. It's just a handwritten note. So there are no logos, none of the trappings that we think of that are necessary for brand development or brand identity. Yet there's a sword in your hands and a handwritten note and a really astute message here that he's got your back, and he's ready to go to battle for you and with you. And so there's all kinds of branding that's happening around that. Now I would ask what you might expect the response rate would be. Maybe I should ask you that. What do you think it would have been?
I want to say a response rate for that kind of a thing would be 100%. And the reason I would think that is because when you're missing earnings, nobody's there to usually come around and support you. They're just kind of kicking you when you're down. So to have anybody who would, what seems like out of the blue, reach out with you and give you some level of encouragement, like, you know what, you missed it this time, but this can be fixed, and this is really hard, and I get that. Just the empathy that's being expressed by that act, I'm guessing, just speaks volumes to that executive or whoever it is that he's reaching out to.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Everything's working just perfectly in that campaign, and that's what he's getting is 100% response rate. Now, also, because I want to talk about metrics, because the metrics are really interesting in all these. So he's getting 100% response rate. That's also already pretty interesting. He spends, direct mail, pennies make a big difference in a campaign, pennies per piece. He's spending $1,000 every time he sends one of these swords. The sword is made up. It's engraved with the CEO's name and an inscription. It's just this beautiful presentation, the box as well. So anyway, it's $1,000 every time he sends one out, which I think is really interesting. $1,000 per cost per contact is a lot. It's a huge belief in the value that he's offering and the way that he's bringing it to their attention. And so I don't know quite what the ROI is. He hasn't shared that with me, but what I do know is that he can spend $1,000 easily, because every time he gets an assignment as a turnaround specialist, it's worth $1 million and up. So we know that the ROI is huge on this as well. I don't know if it's 3.5 million%, but some of these numbers, how do you even understand a number like 3.5 million%? It's kind of hard to do. And I don't know if do you have time for one more?
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay. Well, there's this one. Now, mind you, these are really way over the top, and you don't have to go way over the top. You can give gifts. You can do all kinds of other things. But there was one story, and I can't actually share the name of the executive or the company, but if you ever saw the movie Forrest Gump, and you might remember a reference to a certain fruit company that he invested in, or somebody invested in. Anyway, that's the company. So anyway, so this software rep was calling on this on the engineering department of this fruit company, and they loved his software solution, and they said, "This is fantastic, we love it. Next thing you got to do is talk to purchasing." So he said, "Okay, great." He reached out to purchasing, and they would not respond to his call, no matter what he did. So finally, he thought, well, okay, then I'll just do an end run. I'll go directly to the CEO. And if you're picturing who the CEO is or was, he was one of the most famous people on the planet, actually, certainly one of the most famous CEOs on the planet. And, obviously he was not going to be easy to reach. And so the rep discovered that when, everything he said. He tried sending faxes, letters, emails, left voicemails. He tried everything he could think of, and nothing was working. So finally, one day, this box shows up on the front counter, and it has air holes drilled in it. It's a plywood box, and a little handwritten note addressed to the CEO. And I'm amazed it was delivered, actually, but it was. It made its way to the CEO. And so the note said, the note just explained the story. I've been calling on your engineering department. They love my software solution. They told me to talk to purchasing. They won't talk to me, so I tried everything I could think of to reach you, and so nothing's worked. So this is my last attempt, my final attempt to try to reach you. So if you would, open up the box. There's a pigeon in there. And on the pigeon's leg is a little capsule, and in the capsule is a little slip of paper. So just write the name of your favorite restaurant, a date and a time, put the slip of paper back in the capsule, release the pigeon, and I'll meet you there. And so there's either a 0 or 100% response rate on this one too. And it was 100%. The pigeon came back. There was the name of a restaurant, a date and a time scrawled on the piece of paper. So they met, and the rep walked out with a $250,000 deal. So,
Wow.
those are over the top, but there are all kinds of ways to break through. And again, I would point out that having a podcast is a great way to add to your VIP statement because you're the host of the show. But also, what a great contact device it is. You don't have to take out $10,000 ads in the Wall Street Journal or send pigeons around. You're connecting with people, and there are a lot of ways, a lot of really interesting ways that you can just use a little bit of imagination and break through in a way that has people saying, I really enjoyed that, or I really like the way this person thinks.
Yeah, and even outside of podcasting, I have friends in the past 12 months that have, rather than doing a podcast, they've just built a show around, say, interviewing people on Facebook Live, or there can be even more turnkey, faster ways to do something similar and build it up. So yeah, be creative. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Well, we're gonna move towards wrapping up. A couple more questions, and then we'll be done here. I think one of the challenges in the workplace today, we have a lot of digital natives. A lot of us tend to want to default towards exclusively electronic communication, but as we're building and growing in relationship with folks, we tend to move from, say, electronic into more phone and in-person opportunities. So, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, what's the mix of electronic versus old school, in quotes, communication methods we should be going after? Because it can't all be just texting and email. There does have to be a point where there's conversations and in-person things that happen. And those are skills that not everybody is comfortable with, like maybe they were 5, 10, 15 years ago, where it was more of a normal part of doing business. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, old school, you got to disabuse everybody from that term because, things just run in cycles. And so what we really should be thinking about is, how do I stand? I mean, that's what we are all thinking about. How do I stand out? And if you're thinking you're going to stand out in a crowded channel, or that's a good way to stand out, you're mistaken unless you find strategies for reaching beyond that. So I would be thinking in terms of being contrarian and forget about, they used to mail things a long time ago. Why would I mail things now? It's kind of a silly way of looking at anything. And really, what a great question this is, because there is that issue of crowded channels, and all these sales reps right now are cramming. They want to know what can I put in my email, or what can I use in a subject line that'll make people pay attention to my email. I think, actually, by the way, one of the things you could do is shorten it a lot. You could shorten the copy a lot. That would help a lot. But whether it's email or the other default right now is LinkedIn, you've got to find ways to stand out more than just making connections. I just wrote about this yesterday. I just happened to be writing about it for the next book, that connecting on LinkedIn has become sort of the equivalent of waving to someone in a car going the other direction on the freeway. It's just so quick. And it's nice to connect with these people, but it's such a fire hose right now to drink from that you really need to do more than just connect to actually create a connection. And so I think reaching off platform, or just using multimodal approaches, makes all the sense in the world. You mentioned persistence, And a lot of times persistence and breaking through has to do with using different channels, not using the same ones. If you keep sending someone an email and another email and another email, and they're not responding, use a different method. Call them, or send them a card. Do something else. And we should just look at that as the default understanding of using email or actually I'm going to put LinkedIn first now, of using LinkedIn and email as our way of connecting, because I think you're going to end up, particularly on LinkedIn, you're just going to end up doing a lot of socializing and not much selling. Or you're going to connect, you're going to collect a lot of names and you won't know who they are and they won't know who you are. And you just need to do more than just wave, go in the other direction on the freeway. So, and people are doing really interesting things. There's one story that, a couple stories that really are fascinating, uses of LinkedIn and then going off the platform. One was Mikey Pauley. He's a sales rep, and he's very, very good at watching and listening and finding perhaps little trigger events that you wouldn't even consider trigger events. But there was one instance where he noticed that someone that he wanted to connect with or was connected with, but they weren't accounts yet, was complaining about the food in the cafeteria, that it wasn't healthy because it was the holidays and it was all candy and cake and all that. And he wished there was something healthy. Well, the next day, a box of produce shows up from Mikey. and that got shared all on LinkedIn, and it went rather viral. And everyone's saying, what a cool thing. I mean, it went viral enough for me to notice it, and it's in the book. It's going in the next book. So that's a great example of using the medium to do a lot more, to really create real connections, because I don't think we have real connections. I think it's really hard to create real connections when there are 600 million users right now on LinkedIn. Soon it'll be 1 billion. I mean, how your brain can't even comprehend this. And people are complaining every once in a while that 30,000 connections as a cap is too few. And I know in a Twitter sense that yes, that's too few, but how do you keep track of 30,000 people? How do you have relationships with 30,000 people? It's just not possible. And I'll just give you one other example that I think is really, really interesting. And that has to do with doing, the term profile scrape sounds kind of an awful thing, but just researching and listening and responding to, and somehow creating an approach that is filled with value and relevance to the people you want to reach out to. So there was this one company, Engagio, and Charlie Lang is the fellow in charge of this campaign, that what they did is they gathered up all of the profile pictures of the people that they wanted to reach, and they wanted to do this at an event. They knew they would be at this event, so they gathered up all of these profile pictures and had custom bobblehead dolls made up. And they then sent a picture of the bobblehead doll to each of these people and said, "Come to our booth and claim your doll." And I don't think it was 100%. I think they probably had a few left over. But what a brilliant way of using what you find on LinkedIn and making much, much more of it, and making much more of a personal connection. And I think in one way or another, that's what we need to do. I use cards when I make connections, or sometimes prints, but I don't send it to everybody. I mean, I can't. I just can't keep up. But I think that's what we need to do. I don't know if I've given you really a percentage breakdown. I just think that when you find some of the connections you're making on LinkedIn are ones that you're really going to want to track with and develop into real relationships. And the only way you're going to do that, you can continue to interact on LinkedIn, but really the only way you're going to do that is to meet in person or to send something or do something else other than keep connecting on LinkedIn.
Well, Stu, when you think of the readers, say, getting to the last page of your book, if they only take away one core message, what do you hope it is that they've heard loud and clear?
Oh my gosh! Well, be audacious, be clever. Don't be afraid to step out and stand out, because that's what you need to do to stand out and to connect in this day and age.
Well, and as a podcaster, I would be doing a disservice to my listeners if I didn't ask you about your podcast. So you've got a podcast themed around how to get a meeting with anyone. tell us what the listeners can expect when they subscribe and start listening to your show. What's the format? Who are some of the guests that you have had on recently?
Yeah, sure. Well, and actually, it is called the How to Get a Meeting with Anyone podcast. I hope that's easy enough to remember. Right now, what's showing up in the interviews is, and the guests are a lot of the interviews that I'm using for the next book, and these are really interesting because, some of the case and this next book will be a collection of case studies with a lot of photography, and so that you actually get to see what these campaigns look like and how they worked and what the takeaways were from each of these. There are some campaigns that I featured in the original book, the one that's out now, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, but there are a lot of new ones, and so you'll be hearing from all kinds of people that are doing really innovative things to break through, and one of the things that has really been very interesting is just examining business cards. There's some business cards that are acting and functioning on a completely different level. So we're talking to people who've created some of these business cards that are kinetic, or they're. I don't know if you've ever heard of Kevin Mitnick. Have you heard of him? And have you
Oh,
ever
yes, yes.
card?
I worked.
The lockpick
yes.
set.
Yep. I love
what
Kevin.
a cool card.
Yeah.
And that acts on a very different level than the rest of the business cards, or James Bond's divorce card. This is what it tears in half, and his contact information's on both sides. And so some of these are really great involvement devices. So I'm talking to all these people behind these campaigns, or to the people who are actually using some of them. I mean, I talked to the divorce lawyer who used the card that tears in half, and Kevin Mitnick, and so on, to hear about what are these experiences like to use these things that help you break through and get a lot more meetings and a lot more results from your time. So it's just a lot of fun, and just like the interview we've just done. I mean, this is just kind of a fun. Our interviews are just fun, informal conversations where I'm really just in awe of what these people are doing, and it's like we're having a beer somewhere, and sitting around talking about how to sort of plan out these capers. So that's the podcast. It's How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. You find it on YouTube. I'm sorry, not YouTube, but iTunes. And otherwise, if you want to connect, you can connect with me on stuheinecke.com or cartoonlink.com or just on LinkedIn.
Well, and like we do with every episode, I'll be sure to include detailed links in the show notes. So when you're done listening, head on over to shauntabatt.com. We'll have links to places where you can connect with Stu, places where you can buy his books, places where you can subscribe to the podcast. It'll all be linked up right there. And as a book marketing guy, I love that you have a podcast that features a lot of the guests that will make an appearance in your next books. That is a wonderful way just to build momentum as you're heading forward towards release. People are going to be increasingly excited and bought in and interested in those people and their campaigns. So from a marketing perspective, brilliant. I love that you have a podcast that's giving you that momentum there. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Stu Heinecke. Once again, our book today was How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. To connect with Stu and find out more, be sure to visit his websites at either cartoonlink.com or stuheinecke.com. And Stu, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It has been a great pleasure and an honor to speak with you. You brought a lot of value.
Thank you so much. Great to be here joining you.